Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Comic Anthologist. And if you're tuning in for the first time,
hit that subscribe button and hit that bell to let us know that you appreciate this channel and appreciate this show.
and also too, with that bell, basically everything that comes up in terms of all the things that we present or whatnot will sit up there and be sent to you directly on your YouTube channel. Any case, what we wanted to discuss today is another chapter of Iron Man.
Right.
Basically, and we're talking about the event called Armor Wars, which it was from 1987 to 1988.
Yeah, it did. So
Basically, and it was the transitionary period where Tony Stark was wearing the Silver Centurion armor because at that time he basically had created it in such a way to combat Obadiah Stane's
from issue 200 of Iron Man, but the whole thing was at some point in issue 225, the culmination of the final time that he was wearing that Silver Centurion armor was the beginning of the Armor Wars, aka Stark Wars. And basically what went down in the Armor Wars is that through a surrendering former villain known as Force, Tony Stark found out that when he was analyzing Force's armor,
his technology was being pirated.
It was pilfered by Justin Hammer.
And basically he was putting that kind of technology in terms of the circuitry and everything, the design schematics that was used mostly for Tony Stark's Iron Man armors.
And he never patented it because he didn't want it to get out. But unfortunately the side effect or the backlash was that Justin Hammer outfitted his mercenaries with that kind of armor with Tony Stark's technology. So you had Stiltman,
You had the Beetle.
you had Crimson Dynamo, the Titanium Man, we never know because we'll get to that part of Titanium Man.
Right, and then you had the Controller.
And the Raiders.
And also, too, that sent Stark down a very, very dark path because he also went after government-sanctioned armor wearers, which were the guardsmen who were basically keeping...
Stingray.
Yep, and Stingray. Stingray, his armor didn't have anything to do with Stark's technology, but he still went after him nonetheless because that's why it was called Armor Wars. He was making sure that anybody that had control of his kind of armor or his kind of technology in any kind of circuitry inside the armor was basically he was going to take them down so that way no one else would get hurt or killed behind him.
Yeah, because it got to the point that Stark was very obsessive about his quest on to make sure that no bad people are using his technology to hurt other people. And so even Dr. Doom was on the list, even though him and Dr. Doom didn't go toe-to-toe. But there was a list that came out during the Armor Wars where all the names are listed of people that potentially could use his technology.
Yep.
And then there was one name that was not listed, and it was unlisted for a very reason. Because he turned out to be the final bad guy of the story arc.
Right.
But the cool part is we got to see the Silver Centurion armor at that time, in action for the last time.
That particular armor was always a fan favorite, and even though they said it was a makeshift transformer back in the day, it wasn't. It was just a cool armor to the point where they had changed up the schematics in terms it was red and silver.
Yeah, because I liked that it was different. It was changed.
Yeah.
It was something away from the monotonous red and gold, which red and gold is his standard.
And that's the signature armor color, regardless. But at the same time, it was kind of nice to just break away from the norm and just do something different.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole thing with the Armored Wars, too, at the same time was that each time that he went after the villains that were using his technology,
He was using the Gator Pack.
he would use a negator pack that would fry the circuitry on the armor. But this is the personal dark side that came about. His friendships were strained, and kind of like we see with him and one of the major friendships that was strained and to the breaking point was between him and Steve Rogers, aka Captain America.
Oh yeah.
At the time, which he was known as the Captain. But because everyone at that time, during that time period, was having color changes with the armor or with the costumes, the Hulk was gray. And Captain America was wearing a black costume known as the Captain.
Yep, he was wearing black, red, and white. But that's a whole nother story for another time.
Yeah, another time.
That was basically because the government made him give up the identity of Captain America because they owned it. So he decided to go on the run and go underground and be the captain.
And Thor was wearing another armor. And Thor was wearing armor because of a curse that Hela had placed on him. So,
which made his bones brittle. But like I said, that's a whole nother time. But that was basically Marvel's way of breaking up the status quo and changing up things to make things a lot more interesting. The Silver Centurion armor was no different for this particular time.
The Silver Centurion armor was our high school years.
Of course it was.
So.
I mean, literally, issue 200 and all those issues that came after. I mean, that was literally from.
Yeah, and then the final issue with him wearing the Silver Centurion armor, which had transitioned to then towards the end of the Armor Wars, where it was the neo-classic red and gold armor. Basically, that Silver Centurion armor was our high school years, man.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Then, like right when we graduated high school, was the final issue.
Yeah, that was the final issue. I mean, show the graphic novel. I mean, show basically this is what ended up as a direct result. Now, I know they've come out with different armors right now.
Right.
But at the same time, that one for us was pivotal because they went back to the original, but they basically changed it to the neoclassic original before they put the Extremis armor, and then they modified the stealth armor and did all the other things.
Extra stuff, right.
Because with the other succeeding writers that have come after it, they basically made it so that, they had to basically make the armor part of their run and part of Stark's history.
I want to interject too. Did I mention the writers and the artists of the series? It was David Micheline, Bob Layton, Mark D. Bright, and Barry Windsor Smith.
And Barry Windsor Smith basically did the last issue, the epilogue of the Armor Wars.
But the whole thing with the story was getting back to Stark's obsession. He wanted to make sure that other people weren't getting hurt, and it fractured his relationship with Captain America. At the time, he's known as the Captain. It fractured his relationship with the West Coast Avengers. They kicked him off the team.
Oh yeah.
And then
he ended up having to fire himself because the general public had no idea
that they were Tony Stark and Iron Man were one and the same.
Exactly.
Because that's where they were the heavy emphasis on the secret identities. But at the same time, then this is the part where it gets dark, where Stark goes all the way to Russia. He even lies to his friends. He lies to James Rhodes and says that he wanted him to come with him to Russia or whatever, but he eventually lied to him and took off on his own with the modified stealth armor.
Oh yeah.
And basically went there to put a negator pack on, because there were two armored individuals in Russia, which was the Titanium Man
and the Crimson Dynamo.
Okay, so then when Tony Stark lied to James Rhodes to make sure that he didn't want him to become an international criminal because of what his actions were doing during the Armor Wars.
Right.
So he flies off to Russia in a modified stealth armor. He both gets into combat both with the Crimson Dynamo and the Titanium Man, but unfortunately
it leads to
the death of the Titanium Man because he slaps a negator pack on the Crimson Dynamo. But with the Titanium Man, they get it because since that Stark's armor was so modified that it could only fire 3 repulsor shots. He had used all of his repulsor shots, so all he had to do was retreat, because then the Titanium Man crushed the other negator pack. So he's like, no, I got to get out of here. And he put the Titanium Man put Iron Man in a bear hug, and so Iron Man did his best to fly like upwards to try to break the hold. Unfortunately, titanium
has a ignition point, and it's what, 3,000, 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or it's a very high temperature.
I'm not really certain, but what happens is basically through the boots of Iron Man's armor, it ignites Titanium Man's armor, and it kills the pilot on the inside, which was known as the Gremlin at the time.
And basically, with titanium, once it is ignited, it does not burn out until it's completely exhausted through and through.
And they killed the pilot on the inside like that.
Yeah, fried him within seconds.
So and then this is where we get to the final part of our Armor Wars. What happens is the last name on that list turned out to be an individual known as Firepower. And Firepower was basically created by another one of Stark's rivals known as Edwin Cord.
Yep.
And so basically, Firepower was set up by the government to basically take down Iron Man, but then also too, Edwin Cord knew exactly what the Firepower armor was to go. It was a darker design behind it. It was going to be basically the ultimate in riot control. So if people got out of hand, they would be able to quell or silence the crowds, or like say if people were protesting, they could use the Firepower armor to go and kill everyone and say no.
And blame everything else on someone else, but the Firepower armor was basically
sanctioned by the U.S. government.
Yep, and basically that couldn't happen, and that was using Stark's circuitry that he was trying to get back. and trying to destroy out there.
Right.
But this, in turn, leads to Stark creating a new armor once the Silver Centurion armor is destroyed, because he faked his own death.
Yeah, because the thing was, right at the end when, or towards the end of that storyline, Firepower and Iron Man get into a fight, but it's clearly one-sided, where Iron Man gets brutally beaten, cracks a few ribs, and his arm is broken, or however restrained or whatever. Basically, to fake his own death or fake that Iron Man's death, they put stores of blood into the
now, this is a spoiler alert, just in case if you haven't
even read it. So
if you haven't read it, so
it's, to me, because it's always been one of the best Iron Man stories I've ever read. Period. They put the stores of blood into the armor, and then Firepower basically shoots the armor and blows it up with a mini nuke called the Terminax.
Because the government was, when Stark flew inside the helicopter just to try to get a break or whatnot, the government had already targeted the helicopter to kill anybody that was inside the helicopter that had anything to do with Iron Man. So they didn't care if they were going to kill civilians. They just wanted to get that guy get Iron Man out of the way.
Right, because see, the government was mad at Tony Stark for negating the Guardsman armors.
Right.
Because they also were based off of Stark technology. The Mandroids, another thing that was based off of Stark technology, but they were government sanctioned. The government didn't like when Iron Man basically negated their armors or negated their equipment.
In other words, he took his stuff.
He basically took the government's toys.
Yep.
And so, to make it long story short, when Tony Stark recovers after the Silver Centurion armor is destroyed, then Firepower then goes and starts destroying Stark's financial interests and blowing up parts of his companies, trying to bring him to financial ruin.
Trying to bully him out of business.
At the behest of Edwin Cord, which is another corporate rival of Tony Stark. And I'll get into that story in another time besides Justin Hammer. But make a long story short, Stark then creates the Neo-Classic armor, which is the classic red and gold, but with some more enhancements that makes the Silver Centurion armor look like, okay, you basically have a Toyota and then you got a Porsche. And the Neo-Classic armor turned out to be the Porsche.
Right.
Basically, Iron Man took out Firepower with ease. And then Firepower warned him, saying, okay, well, you took me out, there'll be somebody else to take you down as well. The epilogue to the story, which was drawn by Barry Windsor Smith,
yes,
which was beautifully drawn by Barry Windsor Smith, showed Stark dealing with his guilt behind the people who died because of his technology. The ghost that was haunting him throughout that whole dream sequence in that particular issue was Stark himself.
Right. So basically he was fighting his own demons, but ultimately he was fighting himself, because he was wrestling with runaway technology that he couldn't control. But now that he had gotten it back under control, how he was going to deal with the future of it going from there.
Also, too, one last thing, a tidbit on the storyline, is that he set up with another one of his programmers, Abe Zimmer, to basically, if anyone were to use his technology again, he set up a kind of virtual tapeworm to destroy anyone trying to use that technology
and their computer systems.
And their computer systems. He set that on the World Wide Web, which wasn't the internet at the time. So, but he set it up so that if anyone were to use it, a signal would go out and destroy it. So if it wasn't used by Stark, anyone else tried to use it, that would be a different story.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
If you have any thoughts and comments on this one, definitely hit us up. Any corrections, definitely hit us up. Until then, peace, take it easy, and we'll see you next time on the next episode dealing with Armor Wars 2.
Yeah, thanks for watching.